From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
Welcome back. My name is John, and this is the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. This is your weekly podcast about consumption. We are proud members of the You Run Podcast Network. You can find all of our past episodes, all of our previous episodes, all of our upcoming episodes, and of course, all the other great members on the You Run Podcast Network at yourunpodcast.com. With me this week is the host of the Dewey Pod Monster podcast, and his name is Sean. And Sean, how the hell have you been?
John, if you asked me if I loved Crummy Movie March, I'd return with a question. Do worms like tender young apples?
This is quite possibly the best quote I've heard all week. And I already know the answer, that you are the grand poobah of Crummy Movie March, so I would hope that you enjoy it. So,
do worms like tender young apples, John?
I don't know. I would assume so. Do worms actually like things? I just kind of... Anyway, what have you been watching, Sean? I'm sure you've had... It's been behind the scenes a couple weeks since we've had one of these conversations, and I've been part of some of the shit, but I'm sure that, like me, you have a list of shit to talk about.
I'm going to talk about nothing that we actually watched together, just for some background information to the audience out there. John and I and a few other like-minded individuals spent some time in Florida watching some spring training games and watched a lot of shit, and it was a good time. And that's all we'll say right here for the moment.
We'll give you a little teaser that one of those movies is going to get its own episode next month.
Oh,
and
yes.
I'm sure we'll come back around to that. But
we will expand upon that. But
aside
anyways,
from that shit.
Yeah, aside from that shit, there was a lot of shit. I watched a couple things since I've been back. So we've been back about a week or so. I watched a documentary. It was on Prime or Freevee, which I think is getting absorbed by Prime. But anyways, it's called Underground Inc. I don't know if you've seen this.
Prime owns it. I think they're just killing the
it's owned by
app
Amazon.
and putting. I think they're just killing the app and putting it all in Prime.
Yeah,
but
makes sense.
Whatever. Anyway,
I watched Underground Inc. And it's called Underground Inc. The Rise and Fall of Alternative Rock, which is a documentary on like late 80s, probably the mid 90s bands that got signed, the whole rock explosion, grunge, all that stuff, how it came from the indie space, how the music industry essentially chewed up all these bands and spit them out. A little bit different than the documentary that I watched a little while back called Hype, but this one is more centered around actually interviewing a lot of the members of these bands. It kind of talks a lot about Nirvana's influence and their impact on the whole scene. So they talk about stuff before Nirvana and after, and there are a lot of quotes of band members while concert footage plays, like one of those kind of documentaries where they're showing the bands play and like somebody from the band is commenting about the thing. There are a lot of these quotes from all these guys that make you realize how trite, like they'll play all these record reviews from websites or magazines at the time, whatever. And you really realize how, I don't know, you can only say so many things about an album. You know, like, oh, this one sounded like the chocolate pouring over guitar strings, you know, just like stupid shit like that. So there are a lot of that stuff, or a lot of comparisons of how this album is like derivative of this one. They had a lot of interviews with people from the band Cop Shoot Cop. What else? They talked a lot about, they had like these certain people that were the people that they would go to for all these different things. There was like the guy that you don't know from Helmet, or like the guy in the Rollins band that you don't know the name of, or, you know, just stuff like that.
But
yeah, but I think most people probably wouldn't know who they are. Lots of them like attributed to bands that wasn't the actual popular band that they were in. I don't know. It was pretty cool. It was a good like nostalgia, late 80s, early to mid 90s kind of music thing for me. And I don't know if you noticed when we were on our trip, like when I was playing one playlist, it was all the bands. You wouldn't have known this, but they were all bands that were featured in this documentary. So Prong and Clutch and I don't know.
Just remember a lot of Latino like hip hop radio and stuff.
That too. So. Yeah. Tejano music mixed in there.
Yeah.
So that was one thing. I watched that pretty much after we got back. Another thing, it's a real short watch and it'll obviously be linked in the show notes because everything we talk about is linked in the show notes. Do you remember the music video for Madonna's Poppa Don't Preach?
Vaguely. I remember Madonna. She was still blonde in that video, I think, but that's about all I really remember. So
Poppa Don't Preach is a song by Madonna.
I'm sure if it was on, I'd pick up on it pretty quick.
Yeah.
But
when I describe this to you, you'll totally get it. So Poppa Don't Preach is a song about, like, I guess a girl gets pregnant or something and her dad's upset. No, I'm keeping my baby, right? That's like one of the things. One of the people in the video that plays Poppa is Danny Aiello. Well, Danny Aiello made a response video, and the song is called Poppa Only Wants the Best for You. And he sings this song, and they made a whole video, like, and he's playing the Poppa character, and he's like, you know, doing his own thing. And presumably Madonna's not in the video. And he's kind of like, you know, wistful for the days when his daughter liked him or whatever before she got knocked up and had that brat. But so I watched the video. It's amazing. I will again, it'll be linked in the show notes. The last thing I really want to talk about for the moment is, you're familiar with the writer-director Andy Sedaris, right?
Yeah.
We talked about one of his movies for a Crummy Movie March, incidentally, Hard Ticket to Hawaii. So one of his first...
I don't remember if it's the prequel or the sequel, Malibu Express?
Malibu Express is
equally,
Yep.
Equally titties. So
yeah, so his big thing was Andy Sedaris used to be, I think he was like a director for ABC's Wide World of Sports or something, one of those like sports shows. And he changed and made this foray into directing feature-length movies, and a lot of them were like TNA movies. And
very entertaining.
Yes, and they're usually pretty hilarious. So the one I watched, I think is one of his first, and it's called Seven. And it's not the Seven with Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt and Kevin Spacey, the David Fincher, right? David Fincher did that.
Yep.
It's not that movie. It's from 1979. It's got William Smith, who was in...
Not that William Smith?
Not Will Smith, but William Smith. The one that was... God, what is that movie called? Champagne and Bullets. William Smith from Champagne and Bullets with the real gravelly voice, like the bad guy. It's got Martin Cove from Karate Kid. And
I'm already sold.
Yeah. Platoon. I think he's in Platoon. Terry Kaiser, which you might not know the name, but that's Bernie from Weekend at Bernie's. And the skater dude from Hard Ticket to Hawaii who shoots the bazooka into the blow-up doll. He's in this movie too. And he does a very similar thing where... Yeah, he has the shtick. He rides a skateboard. So the movie is like really, it's basically about William Smith is getting these 6 assassins together to go to Hawaii. Imagine that. And these 7 different assassins are going to take out 7 different gangsters. And they all have they have to be taken out within like a half hour of each other. So they're doing all this coordinated stuff. It's got some TNA. It's not like over the top TNA, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But it's really fun. Like I would say the last 40 minutes of the movie, the last half of the movie is actually really fun. It just don't think too hard about it. Like when you're watching it, one of those kind of movies.
I don't like thinking too hard about movies. So
yeah, so it would be right up your alley. But yeah, so I figured it would be a good way to kind of cap off what I've been watching, to talk about a movie from a guy that made a Crummy Movie March movie. And Champagne and Bullets could have been a Crummy Movie March movie at that point. Because that fit the motif.
No, that movie is a goddamn masterpiece, and I'll have nothing of you speaking ill of it. So
mess would be correct, but a good mess. But yeah, so those are the 3 things that I wanted to kind of touch on that I watched this week. How about you, John?
I got a bunch of stuff that I got jotted down. I'm actually going to go a different route and start with something that's just a straight music recommendation, because I haven't done one in a while, because honestly, there hasn't been a ton of stuff in the last at least 6 months that's really gotten me like that interested. But I came across this artist. Her name's Vandal. She's a South African singer-songwriter who is very similar to Co-Defendants in that she kind of runs the gambit from song to song. Like there's a lot of different genre blending from... she's only got one full album and a handful of singles. And the one that really caught my attention is her newest single. It's called Cruising to Self-Soothe. And it's like it's like somewhere between a punk song and a thrash song, and she's just got a really strong killer voice. I shared a bunch of it on our socials, which is probably gone now because it's that, stories, they disappear. But she's just, again, it will be linked, but check her out. Like especially if you have listened to any of the things that we've recommended music-wise, Co-Defendants specifically being the big one that I would say like is the closest to it, just because even their like her stuff where it feels closer to one genre, it's still like you can't quite put your finger on it. It's not quite like a punk track. It's not quite a thrash track. Then there's a little bit of hip hop like influence in there. It's very diverse, but there's some songs that don't have the same edge from like a music standpoint, but it does lyrically, and the stuff with where it kind of throws that edge in there with the music on top of the lyric mix. It's just a really good mix. It's got a really fresh sound, and I found her music yesterday and spent like an hour right after that just kind of digging into it and just thoroughly liking the shit out of it. So absolutely check her out. That's like the only thing that I'll say that's probably well, not the only thing. One of the things I'll say is actually of high quality, or at least I think it's of high quality. In regards to crummy movies, there was quite a few of them that I watched. I'm going to just talk about two because they're kind of similar. They both claim they star Linnea Quigley, but this is also like Linnea Quigley post year 2000. So it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's a paycheck movie because I highly doubt that if she got paid much. But the first one's a movie called Scream Queen, which is from 2002. It is on Tubi for free, so you can get it easily enough. And basically, Linnea Quigley plays Linnea Quigley, but they gave her a different name for some reason. And she's in it for about 5 minutes and then dies in a car accident. If I remember right, the car accident's like you don't even really see it. And essentially what happens is some dipshit thinks that she was not dead in a car accident. It's some kind of murder, and it's a very, very shitty like shot on video slasher movie after that, with one really, really entertaining funny kill. Like you have to get through like an hour of shit to get to this one kill that will make you laugh your ass off because it goes so much farther than everything else in the movie. And then it's just like 10 more minutes of shit and then credits. So it's not exactly good, but you know, sometimes you gotta watch shit that's not exactly good, right?
It's my motto.
Yeah. Similar to that, this one's a few years later. So this is 2014 Linnea Quigley, but it also has, this movie's called Trophy Heads, and it also has like Brittany Stevens and Jacqueline Lovell and Darcy DeMoss. A lot of women from the late 80s, early 90s, like B-movie Scream Queen era. So think Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers and stuff that we like. And essentially the whole like premise of this movie is that some fucking nerd in his basement really likes all these like shitty movies and picked actresses that they could get the rights to use short clips of said movies in his movies, kind of forces them to reenact. And if you're not watching this on video, I'm using air quotes because reenact is probably giving it too much credit, and then kills them. Basically, it's not a good movie, but it's.
I was going to start taking it personally, but then I realized I don't kill anybody. So,
well,
got that going for me.
You don't live with your mother either, so that's
true.
Part of this.
But I am in the basement right now.
So am I. The basement's the best place, so I want to be up there where all the fucking sunlight is. Anyway, that one's not very great either, but it is also on Tubi and other places for free. You know, the only other thing that I really kind of want to bring up right now, and there's other stuff I could talk about, other levels of shit that we haven't covered yet or talked about yet, but there is a new HBO series that's on that I just found. It just started last week and it's only one episode in. This kind of relates to something, a rabbit hole that both you and I fell into. Have you checked out Celtic City yet?
No.
So again, it's one episode in, and basically this is a 9-part miniseries. And if I'm getting everything right from what I took from the first episode, which is like maybe 5 minutes of like, this is what this series is going to be, followed by where the story starts. It's basically just talking about the Celtics from birth to where they are now. So the whole franchise, I'm not sure where, like, I don't know the Celtics well enough yet. I've only seen one episode, but I feel like it's going into it's basically going dynasty by dynasty, because after they get past the initial, like, this is where the team came from and who bought the team and all that shit, it goes right into the Bill Russell years and their first, I think, 3 or 4 championships, something like that. But it's really interesting because, yes, it's a show about this basketball team and basketball, obviously, but at least this episode spends a lot of time focusing on the racial tensions with Bill Russell being on the team. So he was one of the league's first, I don't know if he was one of the league's first black guys. I'm sure they say that in there, but he was one of the first, like, I guess, superstar black guys, or superstar by that time frame. They were saying that this is only a handful of years after Jackie Robinson was getting started in baseball. And again, I'm sorry that I don't know dates. Like I only watched this once. I didn't take notes or anything.
God damn
But
it.
I know I'm fucking terrible. But if you like HBO docuseries, and I know you do, and I do, obviously.
Oh, it's not a dramatization. It's a doc.
No, it's a docuseries.
Oh,
it's a straight up
I'm even more
docuseries.
interested now. I thought it was
Yeah.
going to be a docudrama kind of thing.
No, it's a straight up documentary, a 9-piece documentary just about the Celtics. And they've, I mean, you've seen a little bit of like a clip of like the Bad Boys Pistons in there and the Lakers years and stuff like that, because they got to get you interested, I guess. But yeah, just one episode in for a sport that, I mean, of the major four sports, I'd say basketball is like a distant fourth as far as the ones that I'm interested in. It just doesn't do a lot for me.
Mm-hmm.
But one episode into this documentary, I'm already like, it should be on right now. Like I might watch the next episode before I go to sleep tonight once we get done here. That's how much I like the first episode. So that's on HBO right now, and I would strongly recommend that unless you just are, anti-documentary for some reason.
I'm interested. I'm piqued. My interest. It's peaked.
Yeah, it sucks that, I mean, this is where like you get into like this era and like how we're spoiled now. Like the only thing I don't like about it right now is because it's on HBO, it's appointment viewing. So it's Monday night for the next 9 weeks. And that's fine. Like I don't need to be at the TV to watch it, but like there's something about now that we're spoiled by Netflix and, every other place. When I got done with episode 1, I'm like, man, I'd really like to keep going. Like I'm only like an hour, maybe an hour, 20 minutes, whatever it was for the first episode into it. Like I could easily sit through another episode of this or try to crank some more of this out right now. And no, I got to wait each week until it, so that's my like arrogant idiot bitching. Like, I like shows to be here now. I don't want to wait. But
that sure is a fuck of a bummer, but it is what it is.
Do? But yeah, like I said, 2 goods, 2 shits that I got for the week before we get into this edition of Crummy Movie March. Are you ready to switch gears and talk about a crummy movie?
I just want to add one last thing. Blue Sky today announced that they will do 3-minute videos. They've been restricted to 1 minute. I'm posting videos of crummy, shitty movies that I watched throughout the year at internal-bleeding.bluesky.social. I think that's all of it. So I'm excited because now I don't have to edit my shit so much. Speed up. I've been speeding clips up so I can make it a minute.
I like speeding clips up. It makes it funnier.
Yeah, but when you want to really drive that shittiness home, sometimes it's nice to have 3 minutes. But that's all I had to add.
Well, with that in mind, we will be back and we will plug more social medias and we will talk about our movie this week, Primal Rage. Not the video game, the movie. Not that movie, the earlier movie. We'll be right back. Hi everyone, AI John here. Have you ever watched a movie that you loved and wished you could get a fresh perspective from someone who's never seen that movie before? That's just what's in store for you on the Reaction Shot podcast. Dave takes a deep dive with his guests to chat, dissect, and review these movies, and even discuss the impact the movie had on pop culture. Head over to yourunpodcast.com to check them out and all the other members of the You Run Podcast Network. All right, so we are back, and as mentioned or promised, maybe threatened, we are going to be talking about the movie Primal Rage. This particular movie is from 1986, I think, but I've also seen 1988 in a couple places. So
I've got 88.
So depends on where you look, whatever it is, doesn't really matter. It's a movie. It's about rage that is primal. As always, we're going to start with a third-party review. This week's third-party review is from Haley over on Letterboxd, and Haley gives this movie 4 out of 5 stars and said, "Could have used me some more baboon, but if you're dumb like me and you love stupidly fun movies, I can guarantee you'll like this."
I agree.
So, Sean?
All right, show over. Here
Sean,
we go.
What is Haley talking about?
Because it's hot dog time.
All right, so for that, we go over to IMDb. We look up the name Primal Rage. And there's multiple Primal Rages, as you mentioned before, but we're going to go to the 1988 one because I feel like that's probably closest to what we're talking about. And this has the original title of Rage, Furia Primitiva, and this gets a 5.4 out of 10 on IMDb with 1,700 ratings. And we read the storyline or the plot, never know which one's which, but we read the one on the top because if it wasn't supposed to be read first, they wouldn't put it on the top. It says, a scientist at a Florida university accidentally creates a rage virus while conducting experiments to restore dead brain tissue in baboons. The virus soon spreads. If we scroll on down to the storyline, it is care of Jojo Mac, and it says a scientist at a Florida university inadvertently creates a rage virus while performing experiments intended to restore dead brain tissue in baboons. When a journalist for the college paper breaks into the campus lab, he's bitten by one of the infected baboons. The virus soon spreads to a trio of rapists and a valley girl, all whom go on killing sprees.
I'm going to put it out there now because I did this through the entirety of me watching this movie, and I know this isn't what it is. I very much so spent most of this movie like, oh, it's a were-baboon movie. Basically a werewolf, but in baboon form. And it kind of is. It's actually a lot closer to the storyline of 28 Days Later, just on a much, much, much smaller scale. That was the thing that kept going. So if I say the phrase were-baboon, that's why, is because that's what kept popping up in my head as I was watching this movie unfold. With that in mind, Sean, is there anyone in this movie that we really care about? I mean, I only recognize, I think, one person in this, but barely. But
well, I'm going to mention more than one. But
I figured.
Yeah, so we've got Patrick Lowe, who plays Sam Nash. He is a reporter for the college newspaper. You may have noticed him or recognized him from Slumber Party Massacre 2. He is not related to Rob Lowe. We have Cheryl Arutt, who plays Lauren Daly, who feels compelled to tell everyone her name. Hi, I'm Lauren Daly. She's been in some ABC after-school specials, an episode of Charles in Charge. But if you look at her IMDb now, almost everything is her appearing as herself because she shows up on a lot of crime shows because she's a clinical and forensical psychologist now. We've also got Sarah Buxton, who is in Nightmare Beach. She's in Rock and Roll High School Forever. She's in Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. If you've seen her, you'll probably recognize her. She has really bright, striking blue eyes, which almost are off-putting to me. Mitch Watson plays Frank Duffy, another reporter. He's mostly a voice actor now, writer on cartoons. And the last big person I'm going to talk about is Bo Svensson, who is probably the most high-profile actor in the movie. He's been in some Tarantino movies. He was in Kill Bill. He was in Inglourious Bastards. He's a big character actor. He walks around the movie with the probably best described science in the front, party in the back hairstyle, with his mullet that he's got rubber banded for a little ponytail.
I called it a twat knot.
Yeah, I mean, that's fitting. That's a fair description for sure. And I also want to say, before we get into anything else, if you've seen Nightmare Beach, this is the same writing and directing team. So I feel like this really kind of strikes the same chord as something like Nightmare Beach. It feels like the same kind of thing to me.
So we might as well just go from there. The thing that really stuck out, there's a lot of things that stuck out to, well, maybe not a lot, but there's a couple things that stuck out to me. One of the things that stuck out to me was the music cues in this for two reasons. One, I don't know if they just used the same tracks that Goblin used from Dawn of the Dead and sped them up or copied them and made them slightly different enough that they can't sue. But if you've seen Dawn of the Dead or any Argento film from 1978 to roughly 1985, this music's going to sound extremely familiar to you because it's kind of like the greatest hits of that, just played in really awkward times and at really high pace compared to a lot of things that happens in this movie. And I don't want to go into negatives yet, but that is one of the things that is the most jarring about this is the pacing paired with the musical cues in this is just, it's something. I'm not even sure what to call it at this point.
Well, the thing that strikes me the most about this movie, especially at the very onset, the music that's playing is like this poppy 80s kind of new wavy kind of sound. The song that
Low
plays over and over. Yeah.
So,
Say the Word is the name of the song. They play this movie at the beginning and it gives you this vibe.
It's like a bubblegum commercial from the early 90s.
Yeah. And they play it multiple times throughout the movie. They play it at the beginning. There's this whole thing later on where it's actually a quote unquote a live band playing the song. And the way that the movie starts out, it gives you the thing that always struck me when I've seen this movie is the music is totally opposite of what actually happens in the movie, but it's also because it plays at the beginning, it gives the movie this whole feel of being like one of those college TNA movies or a college comedy where they're going to get into college hijinks or whatever. And some of that actually happens a little bit in this movie. So it's always something that I really enjoy about the movie. Every time I've watched it, is like, if you only knew like the crazy, silly, hilarious shit that was going to happen in this movie after this, it really sets this weird stage where, because Sam is riding around on his Vespa or whatever, and he's like snapping pictures of people. There's all these couples like kissing out on the campus lawn and whatnot, and it's just totally different than what the actual rest of this movie is.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I wanted to bring it up now, because I think the music can fall in a positive, and I'll get into my negatives with it later. The positive side with it is, one, it's very memorable. Like, not only does it make you feel like you've kind of heard it before, because I think you have, or most likely you have. I'd be shocked if you haven't seen some of these other films and this is what you went to first, but I'd be impressed too. It's definitely something that is, a lot of times you could say like a score or a soundtrack is almost its own character within the film. Like, it adds that much, or maybe distracts you that much from the movie. And this movie's musical cues absolutely are, say what you want about them, they are very noticeable whenever there is music going on in this movie. There's never a point wherein, like, there's a lot of times where there's just like either ambient sound or dialogue or background noise or whatever, but when the actual like soundtrack kicks in, holy fuck, are you aware of it? And it's kind of entertaining. And you know that as soon as you hear it, it's almost like we just mentioned a movie that you don't really have to pay attention to. This movie, you could almost like put this movie on and just wait till you hear the music kick in and go pay attention for 5 minutes, and then go back to whatever you're doing. You're not going to miss that much. So for better or worse, it has that going for it. So I'm assuming this isn't your first watch with this. So what are some of the other things that drew you to Primal Rage?
That what? My YouTube Primal Rage?
That drew you to Primal Rage for Crummy Movie March?
Well, I think just that whole thing, it feels so much. Again, I'm going to bring this, it's going to be the drinking game of the episode. When I say Nightmare Beach, you take a drink. It just feels like a fun horror movie. Like it's not, it doesn't take itself too seriously. So basically, like, the whole story of this movie is Sam is a reporter for the school newspaper. He's like an investigative reporter. His friend Duffy is another reporter, and he's the one that's kind of more gonzo. He'll do what needs to be done to get the story. He'll break into places. He'll, his story at the beginning of the movie is, or the one that people are looking for him about, is like this group of co-eds that try to bag, I want to say like male athletes or something. Like, they're this whole crew of these girls, and they come and they're trying to find Duffy, and Sam is there, and they think he's Duffy, and he's like, wait, no, I'm not this guy. So this whole thing is going on, and this side story is that Bo Svensson plays this doctor, I think his name is Etheridge in this movie, and he is conducting these experiments on baboons where he'll inject this concoction, and it's supposed to like revive dead brain cells, and he's doing it in effort to sell this drug or whatever it is to a pharmaceutical company. So they're trying to, they're doing these trials on these baboons to see if it works, and it fails spectacularly. And the pharmaceutical guy's like, I'm going to give you 30 days or whatever to develop this thing. So Sam knows something weird is going on campus with these baboons, but he doesn't really have the balls to go and break in himself and really investigate. So Duffy goes on to say that he's going to do it. So he breaks in. He's getting pictures or whatever, and he goes in where the baboon is. The baboon gets out, it bites him, and then spectacularly does this like header through a window and gets hit by a car after he does this little dance in the street, and the cops come and they hit him. Well, then what happens is Duffy becomes... You
forgot to mention, and as the guy who's usually against baboons getting hit by cars on this show, this baboon puppet that gets hit by a car...
Oh my God.
It's like Stretch Armstrong turned into a baboon. It's so bad that it's, and really there is a real baboon in this movie. Like, you can see it in the cage, and you kind of see it walk across the street and like throw some shit. And when the cops, they put some lights on him, you don't see, I doubt they even got this car that close to this chimp.
Yeah,
but
baboon.
He does the typical raise the roof and be like, hey, fuck you, cops. And then that's when they throw Stretch
double
baboons.
Barrels.
Yeah. Baboon Armstrong. into the cop car quite tremendously. And like I said, it's one of those that's so ridiculous looking that it's not even worth getting like upset about. So
yeah, it's so over the top that there's no way you could confuse this with being a real baboon. There's also scenes where the baboon's like skull is basically open and they're like poking shit. Clearly a
Puppet.
rubber, baboon. But anyways, keep calling his name. The actor's name is Mitch. Duffy gets bit. It becomes infected, and he starts to become rabid. Essentially, like he goes on to infect other people, and then that spreads to the girl, one of the girls, and this trio of these guys that are like these meathead frat guys that are much like the women at the beginning of the movie. Their thing is like they have group sex with whoever they can drug or whatever, and they get infected. So this whole thing becomes like, there's this whole scene at the end where it's spoilers. They're dressed up in this is a negative for me. Yeah, very Karate Kid like. This whole movie, which you don't really know because they kind of just mention it in passing, but the whole backdrop of this movie is it's supposed to happen around Halloween, and there's a Halloween dance.
Yeah, you don't ever realize that until you're at the Halloween dance.
There's one offline I actually have in my notes. Let me see if I can find it. It says something to the effect of, no offense, John, okay? So when I preface it by saying no offense, you cannot get upset with me. That's a rule.
I'm pissed already.
A dislike, we'll just jump into one dislike for me. It says the backdrop of this whole turn of events is Halloween. It's only here as a plot point at the dance. On the other hand, it gives the infected a great camouflage because they can show up in a costume or they can look really fucked up, but it feels like an afterthought. And my line that pertains to you says, John is going to miss the part where Sam asks the, quote, college vice president about last year's ball. So I don't know if you missed it or not, but
Nope,
these guys show up in these skeleton costumes. Yeah, I'm sorry. All right, guys, we got to take a break here. John is so pissed off. They show up in these skeleton spandex costumes with pretty cool masks. I did like the masks.
Kind of look like
masks, like Skeletor.
Yeah.
With
but
flashing eyes. Yeah, but not that cool. But yeah, so this whole movie's just kind of that's what it all revolves around, this whole Halloween idea that's not really explored very well. It's just really for this plot point to let these guys run around and look fucked up, but nobody notices.
In fairness, I'm fine with it just being a plot point. I don't feel like, I agree with you that it's a plot point and it adds to the end of the movie. And this is either the best or the worst Halloween party in existence of Halloween parties. Like this is a full on like
masquerade
concert size masquerade ball rager with the same fucking song from the beginning of the movie playing incessantly with some like Cyndi Lauper knockoff for, it feels like 20 minutes that the song's just playing on a loop. And I do remember thinking when I was watching, I'm like, if I was at this party, I'd be screaming, shut the fuck up at this band, because they just are playing it's not even the song. It feels like it's just like the chorus of the song, just over and over again.
Yeah.
But you see again, for college kid costumes at a costume party, these are straight up like Hollywood productions of costumes that are walking around. There's like saws that are splitting masks in half with like effects coming out of them. Like half the budget of this movie might have gone to making this fucking whole party happen at the end of this movie.
You hit one of my points right on the head. These costumes, these masks, like I think 90% of the budget of the movie was spent on these things. And I have to say, after seeing them so much, they kind of really piss me off. Like I don't know. It's kind of like how I irrationally get upset about clowns. Watching this thing in these costumes, I get irrationally upset at the way that they look. They all look like they were made by the same person or something, the same production house or something made all these masks, which obviously makes sense because it's part of a movie production. But I don't know, there's just something about the masks, like they keep showing them over and over. They really make this centerpiece about these masks at this party. And we're talking about this party and it's like 10 minutes of the movie. And it really
after about an hour and a half of everything else that leads up to it.
So let's temper expectations that this is really like a nitpick, I think, for this whole movie is this Halloween thing.
I think, and I'm going to kind of steer this into mixing a good and a bad, because I can't separate this. This is the big thing with this movie that I can't separate in my head so far. I don't want to say that this is necessarily like well, we'll get to final thoughts when Jerry Springer comes out. But the pacing in this movie is potentially like maddening. If it's not saved by the fact that when the crazy music comes on and Frank goes fucking Frank or anyone else for that matter who's got, Were Baboon going, starts doing their like crazy shit. When the downtimes in this movie are just fucking boring. Like between monkey shenanigans and Halloween parties and whatnot, like when they're just doing plot building or some bullshit, really boring. The first like half hour or so of the movie, like after Duffy gets bitten by the bat or scratched or how, I don't remember if he got bit or scratched, but he gets fucked up by the baboon a little bit, but not really fucked up. Basically up until he goes, no pun intended, till he goes ape shit and starts screaming at a cop car and like fucks that up. And then goes to the hospital and goes ape shit there. Like those two are like, if you were looking at this like a lifeline, it's just like really low, like super muted beeps. And then all of a sudden you're on like heart attack level, like insanity. Then it's back down to nothing for another 10 minutes. And then just like crank the insanometer back up because we're going to go fucking nuts for the next 5 minutes or so. And that's kind of the thing that's interesting. Like, it sells itself enough on the crazy side that, I mean, spoiler, it's recommendable just on that, because when it goes nuts, when it goes baboon, it goes full baboon, and that makes it worthwhile. When it's not doing something related to whichever, because there's really, I guess, 5 infected people that they primarily focus on throughout the course of the movie. There's Frank, Chick, was it Debbie, or is that whichever one it was?
Debbie,
was Debbie. So there's Frank, there's Debbie, and then these 3 dickholes who are not good people.
Lovejoy and crew.
Yeah. And they don't even really get it till probably the last half hour of the movie or so. Like the last third of the movie. But the times when they're not focusing on someone who's going through werebaboonism are just so fucking boring. And then it's like Sybil. It just like flips and all of a sudden it's like, all right, well now boring dude is being fucking nuts and I'm interested again.
I have a kind of a counterpoint to that. I feel like the parts that are really crazy are where the horror and the thriller pieces come in. And when it's not that, that's when they're trying to go this like college hijinks route. It feels like to me, like there's scenes where they're sitting in the bar and they're whatever, they're talking, they're trying to get their little college romance going on. But when they go crazy, it really goes crazy. And my favorite like part of the hospital scene. So when Duffy goes to the hospital or the urgent care or whatever, and he's sitting in the waiting room and he has this freak out moment because he's not getting attended to, which, you've been to an urgent care or an emergency room, you sit and wait for a long time. There is a fully dressed baseball player person with a baseball Cincinnati Reds cap, a jersey. He's got the pants, the stirrups, the whole thing. He even brought his own baseball bat so that when Duffy goes fucking nutsoid like a fat guy, they have something that he can swing and he hits one of the doctors with. They have a full size like library bookshelf that he can knock over, like in the waiting room of this hospital, like not just for magazines. Bookshelves are not just for magazines anymore. It's full to the brim. He can knock it over. And he just runs around like the baboon and he's screaming like he's these real high pitched screams, and he's like doing spins and shit and running all over. I think he ends up killing a cop in this whole like melee, and he's going nuts.
Trying to remember because I think the cop scene's after that, because he goes out.
But he's been freaking out this whole.
Well, it has. They take a break in the middle there because he goes and freaks out in the hospital. Then he goes and like takes a nap in the dirt and his eye explodes for some reason.
Yes.
I'm not exactly sure what that was, but it's in there. And I think that's when the cops come, because it goes from day to night and he's still like dressed the same and everything. And the reason why the cops showing up are so entertaining is they claim that most sets, they try to tell you that people don't do drugs on sets. But if this guy wasn't on something, this guy, they're telling him to scream like a baboon, and he's carrying like, it looks bigger than a 2x4, but he's got this like long hunk of lumber. And I don't think it's like trying to be a stick, because it looks like it's cleaned up, like there's no bark on it or nothing like that. And basically he just comes out of the woods screaming like a fucking maniac and just beats the shit out of this cop car. And I think that's where the cop dies, from what I remember. But I might have flipped those. He might have killed the cop.
I know the cop dies in an auditorium. One of them does.
Yeah. So it also has some good kills in it because it's got very monkey-like kills because there's a couple like jaw lines and faces that get ripped off. I was like, all right, well, that's kind of, I don't know if that was intentional or just what they did for the movie, but monkey-inspired kills, I'm here for that. So that's kind of fun.
Well, I think that like other than this movie's got some great quotes. We've got Lovejoy, who's leading the meathead bodybuilder rapist guys. He's trying to pick up all these girls. He's trying to pick up on Lauren, I think is her name. The main squeeze, Lauren Daly, the one that tells you her name all the time. I'm Lauren Daly. He has these 80s pickup lines, of course. So what do you say you and me do it? And what do you say I lose my face in your tits? Like great pickup lines like this. But the thing with...
You mean that doesn't work?
No, surprisingly it doesn't. I mean, this is the 80s after all. But I think the frat guys being infected, the three guys, is a really great touch. It adds to the menace of the situation. And because they're these, like, they show them working out and they're bodybuilder type dudes, when they get the rage, it's like superhuman strength. It turns into this superhuman strength. Half these things that happen, like they pull doors off the hinges, they pull a door off of the hinges, they pull a car door off.
Yeah, them trashing the car is pretty entertaining.
They do that. They deglove a guy. They like grab his whole wrist or whatever and pull his skin off his hand in the dance. The dance is this cover because the music is incessant and they're all in a trance because they've heard say the word like 500 times in a row, that nobody in the dance notices that the guy that's like with the hangman costume is actually getting hung. The guy with the faucets on his face actually gets his head crushed and blood sprays out of all the different faucets on his face. Just great stuff like that. It's great cover, but I like that these guys who are assholes throughout the entire movie get infected because then it just makes it like, it just amps up the, I don't know, that like ominousness of them having the rage where they're just like, they're like steroid freaks and they have the ability, like you said, they beat the shit out of a car. They kill a Dracula because he's a Dracula. Like, you don't know why they kill him. They just do it.
Well, the other thing, not that I want to glorify what kind of characters these are, but the thing that makes those three getting all babooned up and were-babooned entertaining is it kicks it into fourth gear. Like, if this movie's just cruising along on the highway in third gear with the occasional, like, construction stop and then going from, like, 20 to 60 erratically, this movie is basically like the highway's opened up and we're going to leave it on 90 for the rest of this ride. And just hope that we don't like blow out the transmission in the process. That's basically what happens once these guys not initially get, because they get fucked up by the chick, right? Debbie or whatever. Like, they try to rape her and she baboons them off essentially.
Them.
Yeah. Once they start to turn, it just feels like the movie's in a whole different gear from that point forward. And it's not just the danger of these. Before that point, when it was just Frank and Debbie who were babooning out, and maybe there was another one that we never really saw, but I'm sure they would, whatever. When it's just those two, you kind of always feel like this is just like one cop putting this person down away from the movie being over. Once you have these three like maniacs going on, it still kind of feels like the right cop could put this down with 3 bullets, or the right person with a gun would do that. But because there's now 3 of them and they're all in costumes and they're just going nuts, it just ups the ludicrousness of this idea to a whole different level. And it just never really takes its foot off the gas for the rest of the movie once they do that.
Well, you think it does up until the very end, which I don't want to spoil because...
Yeah, I'm not talking like...
Yeah. But
it's not like this movie goes into the credits still like driving 90. There is a little bit.
It does eventually. They do eventually hit the brake.
What about you? Are there any things that you don't like about this movie?
I think the big thing I've already pretty much mentioned, the backdrop of Halloween, it just kind of being an afterthought. It would have been nice to have like a lot more of that, or at least give you kind of more hints, like a little bit more of a breadcrumb.
Town decorations or something.
Yeah, exactly. There's no decorations anywhere on campus that show that this is a Halloween time. I mean, it's Florida, so it's hard to tell by a season, but there's no, like, they're in bars a couple times. There's nothing up. There's no mention of it except for that one-off line. What are you going to do anything about, to curb the events of last year's ball? Which obviously this year's ball is going to be it's going to be last year's ball.
It's curved, but not the way you want.
Right. And I think the other thing, I mentioned the costumes, like what college dance. I didn't even know they had dances like this at college. Like they didn't have, as far as I know, I was not going to these college dances when I was in college. But as far as I know, we didn't have these. And the other thing is like, I think it's a plus and a negative. It's like I said, the Halloween dance is a perfect backdrop to have all these people murdered and no one notices. And they're just like, oh, that's so cool. Look at that guy hanging. That's awesome. And they just they're still boogieing in the background. Like they don't even
doing
notice
the Charleston or something.
Yeah, they're doing, exactly. The twist or whatever, the chubby checkers playing and the backboard lifts up and the guy's getting hung from the thing and nobody notices that. The guy instantly dies, like he's instantly hung and he's just hanging there. It's like an inch off the ground. He's just like, fuck it, I'm dead. And he just like lays there. He doesn't even twitch. That was
probably for the best.
Yeah. Why put up a struggle? Fuck it, I'm dead. So yeah. I think that was like my big, like, I don't know, complaints about the movie.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add with it. Like I said, my biggest thing is the pacing, which I've already gone over a big chunk of it, just how erratic it feels. But again, that can almost play to a positive as well. That's the weird thing about this movie. Like the negatives that are in this, they're certainly there. This is a far cry from being like perfect cinema, depending on your definition of perfect cinema, I guess. But the things that are negative in there, it's like, yeah, but those negatives almost kind of like flip around to becoming like kind of the charm of this movie at the same time. But I don't have a whole lot else to add with it. This is probably a shorter one. So what time is it for real this time?
Then you're in for a big treat, bro. Because it's hot dog time.
So I'll kick us off. First time back from little spring training. This movie's nuts and it's fun. Where baboons are entertaining. Seeing honestly Mitch Watson, is actually Frank Duffy in this movie, but has been called Mitch multiple times. Seeing him just like fucking rage the shit out in the middle of this movie is by far my favorite parts of this movie because he's so fucking erratic and he sells it really well that I really think they probably just gave him some cocaine and said, be a baboon. And this is kind of the result. Maybe they didn't really give him the cocaine. Maybe he just had it through other means. But I mean, this is a full hot dog for me. Like it's definitely recommendable. It's definitely watchable. It's easy to find. I know it's on Tubi and like a handful of other free spots. So you can watch this movie pretty easily without having to pay for it. It's an hour and a half of your life that you're probably not going to walk away saying this is like the best monkey movie you've ever seen, but you'll probably be entertained because it does have that.
Did you give it a hot dog?
I said a full hot dog.
Oh, full hot dog. I missed it. Microphone was falling. Didn't pay attention.
Goddamn microphones.
Whose hot dog is this? Huh? Yours?
Nah.
So I guess that means it's my turn. I want to say, I mentioned it before, Nightmare Beach and this movie, Primal Rage. I think these two movies are like unsung gems of this whole like genre bending movie oeuvre, I guess, to be like overly, analytical about it. They both, we didn't talk about Nightmare Beach besides me mentioning it like 500 times. So you should probably be drunk by now, but they blend horror, they're thrillers. They have these like comedic elements and these college hijinks. There have to be more of these types of movies out there. So if anybody has any idea what they are, let me know, let us know. Because I think this is a really fun mix of those four genres. And I think it's Umberto Lenzi directed this, or he was the writer. And then, like I said, the same kind of team did Nightmare Beach. So I'm kind of looking at other things that came out around this time to see if there are more in there that are like this. But, the movie's just really fun. I think it's a good mix of those four genres, even the concept of this whole killer virus, the disease, whatever it is that starts this whole chain of events that spreads. It could have spread wider and wider. It had so much potential to become like an even bigger story. It could have just spread like infinitely, but of course this movie encapsulates the idea of just a couple of these lovers, these love stories, and they just wrap it all up with a nice bow. It's not like mind bending, it's not thought provoking at all, but it's just fun shit. And I got to give it a full hot dog. Again, if you've seen Nightmare Beach, you should see Primal Rage. And if you haven't seen Nightmare Beach, but you see Primal Rage, I think you should go watch the other. I think they're great companions to each other. We're only covering the one right now, but full hot dog. I watched this, and I've watched this multiple times. This is probably my 5th or 6th time watching this in the last few years. And it just like, I never get bored of it. It's just a great movie.
in fairness, it's a pretty simple movie too. Like,
Yeah.
and I don't mean this as a negative at all. Like, this is a pretty like straight down home plate. Like, person gets infected, person does fucked up things movie. Like, there's no huge like, oh, this is some government conspiracy to cover up baboon rage and it somehow got like, there's none of that. Like, this is literally like the closest thing to like an early zombie movie, but with chimps that you're going to find. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, not every movie has to be, you know, again, I think the movie that people are going to instantly go to if they haven't seen this is probably going to be 28 Days Later, because it's a very similar premise to start with. Doctors, monkeys, rage, shit goes bad. That obviously set up a franchise and just went such bigger scale from this that, I mean, that's fine. And I haven't watched that movie in probably 20 years either. Like, I remember it just being okay. But I feel like keeping this more small scale just kind of makes it more fun. Not so much that it's not spreading quickly, just that by keeping it more contained in small scale, it lets you do the more insane batshit stuff that they do in this movie, where 28 Days Later, although I will never call that movie a zombie movie because they're not zombies, it feels like a zombie movie because as soon as they turn, they basically do what zombies do from that point forward.
And I think I've even seen on IMDb or somewhere somebody says something about it being like a prequel to 28
It feels
Days
like
Later.
that a little bit.
Yeah.
It kind of, I could see that feel. And this also has, between the music and some of the effects, this has a little bit of that Giallo like feel to it. Like, it's very vibrant reds, very weird pacing and like music cues and all that. So I could see that comparison. If Danny Boyle saw this, I don't know that this was the entire inspiration for that movie, but I wouldn't be shocked by it either. So we're going to wrap this up with question of the week. We did ask a question this week, and you can always answer that question on all our social medias. We'll tell you more about those in a little bit. This week's question of the week was, which big screen primate is your favorite monkey, ape, gorilla, or chimp? You're choosing. We're going to start over on Instagram with our good friend Sam from Feature Creatures DTF, and he says, I am partial to Amy the talking gorilla whose handler was in love with her from the movie Congo. I
Seal
haven't
of
seen
approval.
Congo in a long time, but I feel
It's
like
a
I
piece
need
of
to
shit.
revisit. And that's why I feel like I need to revisit it, because I
It's
know
so
the
bad.
cast is like crazy in that. Like, there's a lot of people in that movie.
Yeah.
Isn't like Sam Neill in that movie or something?
Oh, maybe. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I
Now I
saw that
wanna
in a
look.
drive-in. I saw that in a drive-in with a
jeez.
couple friends, and we were like, this movie fucking sucks. This is so bad. But,
I
you know,
saw
you're in a
it-
drive-in. What are you going to do?
You can drive away. It has Tim Curry in it. So
There, yeah. I know. Yeah, I knew that.
Laura Linney. I feel like there was a Jurassic Park person in here. Maybe not Sam Neill. Anyway, enough about Congo. Fuck that. Also on Instagram. No, yeah, totally, dude. He says, I dig an originator, so it's the original King Kong from 1933 for me. Can't really argue that. 1933 King Kong is my favorite King Kong too, except for maybe the original, like King Kong versus Godzilla, but good pull. Greg from the Krusty Boys just says, chimp. I asked him if he wanted to expand on that because he goes, oh, I guess the chimp from 28 Days Later, because that leads to a bunch of crazy stuff. But I kind of like the answer of just chimp.
The character's name might be Chimp.
We'll go with it. Over on Facebook, our friends over at Dissect That Film, you can follow them at Dissect That Film, said Caesar from the new series of Planet of the Apes movies. I still need to watch the last two of those, I think. You're a big fan of that series, aren't you?
Yeah, they're good. I recommend. Wasn't
See,
even that big of a fan of like the original, like 70s, 60s, 70s ones. Or
I like those.
maybe 70s, 80s. I honestly haven't seen many of them, but I felt like the new series was really good. I didn't see
I've
the
seen-
most recent one.
You did not see the most recent one? That's
No,
one
it was
of
like
the
one
ones
that just came out like 2 or
it
3
came out
years
like
ago.
last year or something like
Yeah,
that.
something like that.
Yeah, I remember hating the Tim Burton one, shocker. And then when they redid it with James Franco, I think that one was good. And I like the one that came out right after that. And then I haven't seen, was it War and whatever the one was last year-ish. Planet of the Apes aside, over on Blue Sky, we have Pearl was XX Pearly XX at Beesky.social. She says, Amy, the talking gorilla from the movie Congo, was always a favorite. Pretty sure she was just a giant puppet, but the way she called the scientist ugly lady while drinking a martini stole my heart. And then At that 80s movie podcast on Blue Sky also says, Manus and Buddha, the two orangutans who played Clyde in Every Which Way But Loose and Any Which Way But Loose Can, or Any Which Way You Can, respectively. Again, I haven't seen those in quite a while either.
It's been a while.
So, Sean, who's your vote for best primate in film?
Motherfucking Dunstan from Dunstan Checks In. Of course. I don't know. I've never seen it, but I thought Dunstan would be a funny answer.
I like
it's got
it.
Jason Alexander. Can't be that bad, right?
Doesn't it have
he was
Thora
in the
Birch in it
McBLT
too?
commercial.
It's got Thora Birch too, right?
I've got no idea.
Dunstan Checks In. Faye Dunaway. Look at you.
Look at you,
should
Faye
actually.
Dunaway.
The poster for Dunstan Checks In almost makes me want to watch it. Not quite, but almost.
It's almost as good as Baby's Day Out.
How's Paul Rubens in it?
See, I told you it was good.
My pick is Cornelius from the original Escape from Planet of the Apes because, and I sent a picture of this to you earlier, goddamn, that chimp has a great bathrobe. It is very 1970s, very vibrant orange, blue, and brown-like colorations. If we can add a picture of it somewhere, maybe we will. If not, just look up Planet of the Apes bathrobe. It will come up immediately. It is stellar. And Cornelius is by far the most underrated ape in Planet of the Apes up until the early 90s when we got the Simpsons version of Planet of the Apes, which was a musical and had breakdancing apes.
Why not?
It was great. You got anything else you want to add in here at the end of this were-baboon extravaganza?
Thora Birch is not in Dunstan Checks In. I checked.
No,
I checked in, and I checked out that she was not in the cast.
But Faye Dunaway is.
That's right.
If you want more monkey shenanigans,
I thought you were going to say monkey shit. If you wanted more monkey shit.
If you want more monkey shit, just go to your local zoo. They'll probably have some available for you. If you want monkey shenanigans, you could follow us on a bunch of social media networks. We're on quite a few of them. You can find us at Dewey Pod Monster on all the social medias that we are on. You can also find all of our previous and upcoming episodes at crap.town or at Rockin' Tomatoes. Both of those will take you to our wonderful site that is full of all kinds of stuff. You can leave us feedback there. And of course, you can follow us at yourunpodcast.com. All of our episodes end up there as well. Please check out the other shows while you are on the network site. There's all kinds of good stuff there for you that we would love to have you check out. Sean, what do you got going on?
Well, I was going to say, if you want your question of the week answered on this here show, you can go to our social medias. We're at Dewey Pod Monster. John posts those usually on the Monday that we record our show, and you can leave your answer. And if it makes the cut, or if there's just not enough responses, it'll be read on the show and it'll be kept in the show. So that's always a good thing. If you want to support the show, the best way for you to do it is to click some of those links that are in the show notes. We link everything we talked about if we can find it online. We do our very best to make it free, but if it's not free, it'll be on Amazon. If it is on Amazon, it'll be noted that way. And if you click on that, if you buy something on Amazon, click on the link that we put in there that says Amazon on it, Amazon will send us $1 or $2 if you spend $1 million. So that's something, and that's the best way to support the show because it helps us pay for the site and Rockin' Tomatoes and buying stupid domains and all the dumb shit that we do here. If you want to check out my up to 3-minute clips on Blue Sky, you can find me at internal-bleeding.bisky.social. And I'm going to be posting up to 3 minutes of video clips of the stupid shit that I watched when I'm not talking about it on this show. And yeah, it can be pretty entertaining. So check me out there.
If you don't want to follow Sean, you can follow us and I'll just repost them. So you'll have to follow Sean anyway.
You'll be indirectly following me and the 6 other people that are following me. It's an exclusive club.
Well, that's it. So exclusivity aside, we will be back next week. We have 1 week left in Crummy Movie March. It comes and goes so quick. I have a feeling that our April theme is going to be just as entertaining, though.
Just as good.
Until then, crummy on. We'll see you next week.
Blah, blah, blah.
I feel like I almost call him Danny McBride. That's not right. What's his name? Danny, not Danny Elfman either. where the fuck he is, Train Spotting guy.
Oh, Danny Boyle.
If Danny Boyle saw this, I don't know that this was the entire inspiration for that movie, but I wouldn't be shocked by it. Maybe Danny McBride had something to do with it. Let's go with that.